My name is Gary. I'm 56 years old. For 12 years, I worked the graveyard shift at the Elm Creek Toll Plaza on State Route 94. It's a lonely stretch of road that cuts through the empty plains of eastern Colorado. Most nights, you're more likely to see a coyote than a car. The job was simple. Sit in a brightly lit box from midnight to 8 a.m., take cash from the handful of truckers and lost travelers who pass through and try not to fall asleep. I liked the quiet. I liked the predictability. I don't work there anymore. I can't. The quiet doesn't feel peaceful now. It feels watchful, and I can't stand the sound of coins dropping. It all started with a car I came to know as the 215. The first time it happened was on a Tuesday. The air was cold and still, the kind of night where the silence is so deep it has a sound of its own. Around 2:15 a.m., I saw a pair of headlights approaching from the west. It was an old car, maybe a late 80s sedan, the kind you don't see much anymore. It was beat up. The paint faded, one of the headlights dimmer than the other. It didn't slow down much as it approached my booth. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. I couldn't see a thing inside. As it rolled past, the driver's side window slid down just a few inches. A hand emerged. It was long, pale and unnaturally thin. It dropped a small cascade of coins into the metal collection basket. The exact change, $1.25. The barrier arm went up, and the car accelerated, disappearing into the darkness without a sound. It was a little weird, sure. Most people at that hour are fumbling for cash. They might say something. This was efficient, anonymous. But I didn't think much of it. I just logged the toll and went back to my lukewarm coffee. The next night, at exactly 2:15 a.m., it happened again. The same dim headlights appeared in the distance, the same beat-up sedan, the same dark windows. The car rolled through, the pale, thin hand dropped the exact change and it sped off. The third night, I was waiting for it. I watched the clock tick past 2:14, and right on cue, the headlights appeared. This time, I leaned forward, trying to get a look inside as it passed. But the windows were just too dark. The pale hand emerged, dropped the coins, and was gone. This became the ritual of my shift, every single night, 7 nights a week. At 2:15 a.m., the old sedan would appear. It was the most predictable part of my job, but it was also the most unsettling. A knot of dread would start to form in my stomach around 2:10. I'd find myself holding my breath, waiting for the dim headlights to pierce the darkness. It was like waiting for a train you know is coming, but you're standing too close to the tracks. After a month of this, the curiosity was eating me alive. Who was this person? Why were they on this empty road at the same time every single night? One night, I decided to try and get a better look. As the car approached, I leaned far out of my booth window, trying to catch a glimpse of the driver through the front windshield as they passed under the plaza lights. The car rolled through, the window slid down, the pale hand emerged, but this time, I was focused. I wasn't looking at the hand, I was looking at the coins. They tumbled from the fingers and fell toward the basket, and they made no sound, not a single clink, not a rattle. They fell into the metal basket in absolute dead silence. My brain couldn't process it. I heard the barrier arm whoosh as it went up. I heard the car's tires on the pavement as it sped away. But the coins, which I saw with my own eyes, had been completely silent. I stared at the basket. The coins were there, 5 quarters. I reached out a trembling hand and touched one. It was real, and it was ice cold as if it had been sitting in a freezer. That's when the dread turned into real fear. The next night, I was a wreck. I thought about calling in sick, but I had to know. I had to have some kind of proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Our system was old, but it had one modern feature, a camera that automatically took a picture of the rear license plate of every car that passed through. I waited. 2:14 ticked over to 2:15. The headlights appeared. The car rolled through. The silent coins dropped. The car sped away. As soon as it was gone, I pulled up the transaction log on my computer. I found the 2:15 a.m. entry and clicked on the corresponding image file. The photo loaded. It was a clear, crisp shot of the back of the beat-up sedan. The taillights glowed red. You could see the dents in the trunk. But the license plate, it wasn't there. It wasn't that it was blurry or unreadable. The space where the license plate should have been was a swirling vortex of digital static, a noisy, pixelated void. My blood ran cold. I frantically pulled up the records from the previous nights. Every single photo of that car was the same. A perfectly clear image of the car itself, and a screaming digital emptiness where the license plate should be. It was a car that was physically there, but electronically, it was a ghost. It was a hole in the world. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some weirdo with a routine. This was something else, something wrong. For a week, I did nothing. I just sat in my booth every night, my heart hammering as 2:15 approached. I'd watch the silent coins drop, my hand shaking as I collected the ice-cold metal. The fear was making me physically ill. I wasn't sleeping during the day. I was losing weight. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to do something. I had to confront it. The next night I had a plan, a stupid, terrifying plan. I waited until 2:14, then I manually lowered the barrier arm. I put a traffic cone in the lane. Whatever this thing was, it was going to have to stop. The clock hit 2:15. The dim headlights appeared. The car approached, but this time it slowed to a smooth, silent halt just before the cone. The engine made no noise. I couldn't hear an idle, a hum, nothing. It was just stopped. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. My mouth was dry. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight, my hand so slick with sweat I could barely hold it. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the booth, and walked towards the car. Each step felt like I was wading through cement. The air grew cold, biting at my skin. I reached the driver's side door. The tinted window was a black mirror reflecting my own terrified face. I need to see your license and registration," I stammered, trying to sound official. There was no response. Just silence. Then with a soft electric hum, the window slid down. I braced myself, ready to see the face of the person who had been tormenting me for months. I raised my flashlight and shined the beam inside. And I saw nothing. The driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel was turning slightly, as if held by invisible hands making tiny corrections. The musty smell of old, decaying fabric filled the air. My mind simply refused to accept what I was seeing. An empty car. It was driving itself. I stood there frozen, the flashlight beam trembling. I slowly lowered the light, scanning the empty interior. And then I saw it. From the empty space of the driver's seat, the pale, thin hand began to rise. It wasn't attached to anything, it just materialized out of the darkness. It moved slowly, deliberately, extending out of the open window towards me. Its fingers were curled, and resting in its palm was a single dark, ancient-looking coin. It was offering it to me. That's what broke me. The sight of that disembodied hand offering me payment. For what? My silence? My sanity? My soul? I screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure terror. I stumbled backwards, falling onto the cold pavement. I scrambled away from the car like a crab, pushing myself with my hands. My eyes never leaving that hovering hand. I got to my feet and ran back to the booth, slamming and locking the door. I fumbled with the controls and frantically raised the barrier arm. The car didn't move for a long moment. Then the pale hand slowly retracted back into the darkness of the car. The window slid up, and with no sound, no sign of acceleration, the car glided forward, passed through the toll, and disappeared into the night. I sat on the floor of my booth, shaking and sobbing until the sun came up. I reported it, of course. I told my supervisor, Henderson, everything. He listened patiently, then asked if I'd been drinking. He suggested I take some time off, see a doctor. He thought I'd cracked under the pressure of the graveyard shift. He didn't believe me. No one would. I requested a transfer to a daytime shift at a different plaza. They gave it to me. I never worked another night shift. I never went back to Elm Creek. But it doesn't matter. I'm haunted, not by a memory but by a question. What was that coin for? What was it offering me? Sometimes I think it was a simple transaction, a ghost paying its way. But sometimes in the dead of night when I'm lying awake in my bed, I think it was something more. I think it was an invitation, an offer to join its silent, lonely journey on that dark road. And the most terrifying part is, some small, tired part of me wonders what would have happened if I had taken it. My name is Maya. I'm 21 now. When this happened, I was 20, working nights at the Spin and Dry 24-hour laundromat on the edge of town to pay for my community college classes. It was a dead-end job in a dead-end part of the city, but I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. I liked the solitude. The rhythmic hum of the dryers was like a lullaby. I used to feel safe there, in my little bubble of fluorescent light surrounded by the dark. I don't feel safe anywhere anymore. Not really. It's been a year, but I still can't get the smell of bleach and damp linen out of my head. And I can't get rid of the feeling that some stains, they don't ever wash out. It started on a Tuesday night in October. The air was getting cold and the laundromat was empty as it usually was after 11 p.m. I was sitting behind the small counter trying to study for a midterm, but the words in my textbook kept blurring together. The only sounds were the hum of the lights and the gentle tumble of a single dryer someone had left running. Around midnight, the bell on the door chimed, making me jump. A man walked in. He was maybe in his late 50s, but he looked older. He was gaunt, with skin like pale parchment stretched too tightly over his bones. His clothes, a thin gray jacket and dark pants, hung off his frame. He carried a single, neatly folded white bedsheet in his arms. He didn't look at me. He didn't even seem to register I was there. He walked with a slow, deliberate shuffle to one of the large, industrial-sized washing machines at the far end of the row. I watched him, my pen hovering over my textbook. There was something odd about his focus. He opened the machine, placed the folded sheet inside, added soap from a small, unmarked bottle he took from his pocket, and started the cycle. Then he sat down on one of the hard plastic benches directly opposite the machine and just stared at it. I tried to go back to my book, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't reading a newspaper. He was just sitting there, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on the churning water behind the glass door of the washer. The most unsettling part was the sheet itself. Even from across the room, I could see a large, dark stain in the center of it. It was a deep, ugly reddish-brown color, like old, dried blood. The wash cycle finished. He moved the sheet to a dryer, and then he sat and watched that too, for a full hour, his expression never changing. When it was done, he took the sheet out, folded it with a meticulous, almost reverent precision, and walked out, the bell chiming his exit. He never once looked at me. The next night, at exactly midnight, he was back, Same man, same gray jacket, same single stained white sheet. He repeated the exact same ritual. He washed it, he dried it, he folded it, he left. The stain, I noticed, was still there, just as dark and prominent as before. This became his routine and a new, unwelcome part of mine. Every night at midnight he would appear. He became a fixture in the lonely landscape of my shift, a silent, unsettling ghost. I started calling him the Watcher because that's all he did. He watched the machine, but I always felt like he was watching me too. Sometimes when I was wiping down the machines or sweeping the floor, I'd catch his reflection in the polished chrome or the glass doors of the dryers. He would be sitting perfectly still, but his head would be turned just slightly, his gaze fixed on me. The moment I'd turn to look at him directly, his eyes would be back on the machine as if they'd never left. His expression was always the same, a profound, hollow emptiness. The fear started as a slow burn. At first it was just a weird story I'd tell my friends. You won't believe the creepy guy at my job. But after 2 weeks it wasn't funny anymore. The dread would start to build in my stomach around 11:45 p.m. I'd find myself watching the door, my heart pounding in time with the ticking clock on the wall, waiting for the chime. He never spoke, not once, and I was too afraid to speak to him. What would I even say? Hey, why do you wash the same bloody-looking sheet every night? One night I decided I had to know more. While he was sitting there staring at the dryer, I pretended to be busy on the computer at the counter. I pulled up the security footage from the previous night. I watched him walk in, watched him do his laundry. I fast-forwarded to him leaving. He walked out the door and turned right. I switched to the exterior camera that covered the sidewalk. I watched him walk down the street until he disappeared around the corner. He didn't get into a car, he just walked off into the darkness. The part that made my blood run cold was when I rewound the footage. I watched myself on the camera as I was cleaning, and I saw it. In the reflection of the window behind me, I could see him. He wasn't watching the dryer. He was watching me. His head was turned, his gaze unwavering for the entire hour. The footage proved I wasn't imagining it. That's when the real paranoia set in. I started locking the door to the small back office while I was in there. I'd do my rounds of the laundromat quickly, my eyes constantly darting towards him. His silence was worse than any threat. It was heavy, suffocating. It felt like he was waiting for something. Then came the night that broke everything. It was a Thursday. He came in at midnight as always. He put his sheet in the wash. He sat on the bench. I tried to ignore him, burying my face in my textbook, but I couldn't concentrate. The air felt thick with anticipation. The wash cycle ended. He moved the sheet to the dryer. He sat back down. An hour later, the dryer buzzed, but he didn't get up. He just continued to sit there staring at the machine. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He didn't move. I started to get really nervous. Was he sick? Had something happened? "Sir," I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "Your laundry is done." He didn't respond. He just sat there, motionless. I waited another 5 minutes, my heart hammering. Maybe he fell asleep with his eyes open. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed a broom, holding it like a weapon, and slowly walked over to him. "Sir," I said again, a little louder. I was a few feet away when I realized the truth. His eyes weren't empty. They were focused. They were focused on me, in the reflection on the dryer's glass door. He had been watching me approach the entire time. He slowly turned his head, and for the first time he looked directly at me. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "I seem to have forgotten it," he said. His voice was like dust and dry leaves, a sound that didn't seem like it could come from a human throat. Then he stood up, turned and walked out of the laundromat. I stood there, frozen, my knuckles white on the broom handle. He had left the sheet. After weeks of this obsessive ritual, he had just left it. My first instinct was to leave it too, to throw it in the trash, to pretend this never happened. But I couldn't. The curiosity was a physical sickness inside me. I had to know. What was this stain? Why was he so obsessed with it? I waited until I was sure he wasn't coming back. The laundromat was empty and silent again, but the silence was different now. It was menacing. With trembling hands, I walked to the dryer and opened the door. The sheet was warm. I pulled it out. It smelled faintly of bleach, but the dark stain was still there. A stark, ugly shape against the white fabric. I took it to the large folding table in the center of the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I took a corner of the sheet and unfolded it. Then I unfolded it again. And I saw it. It wasn't just a random stain, it was a silhouette. The perfect, unmistakable outline of a human body. A small body, curled in on itself, like a child in the fetal position. The shape was dark, detailed, and horribly, undeniably clear. I felt the air leave my lungs. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. This wasn't a stain, this was a shroud. This was a memory, this was evidence. As I was standing there, staring in horror at the sheet, the bell on the front door chimed. I snapped my head up. He was standing in the doorway. The man, he had come back. He looked at me, then his gaze dropped to the unfolded sheet on the table. The sad smile returned to his face. "It never comes clean," he whispered, his voice filling the silent room. Then he took a slow, deliberate step inside and the door swung shut behind him, clicking softly. I didn't think. I just reacted. I dropped the sheet and ran. I sprinted to the back office, slammed the door and fumbled with the lock. I could hear his slow, shuffling footsteps crossing the linoleum floor of the laundromat, getting closer. I threw my back against the door as if my 120-pound body could stop whatever he was. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my fingers so slick with sweat I could barely hit the numbers. I whispered frantically to the dispatcher, telling her a man was in the building, that I was locked in the back. I could hear him right outside the door now. I heard a soft scratching sound like fingernails dragging slowly down the wood. Then slants. The police arrived in what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. They found me huddled in the corner of the office, sobbing. The laundromat was empty. The man was gone, and so was the sheet. They took my statement. They were polite, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. A creepy guy, a stained sheet that disappeared. It sounded like the ramblings of a scared young woman working a lonely night shift. There was no sign of forced entry. The security footage only showed the man coming in, and then me running into the office. He never appeared on camera again. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I quit my job the next day. I couldn't go back there. I couldn't be in that room with the hum of the machines and the smell of bleach. It's been a year. I try to tell myself it was just a disturbed man, a harmless eccentric. But I can't. I know what I saw. I touched it. I saw the shape of that small, curled body. I have nightmares now. Not about the man, but about the stain. I dream that I'm drowning in dark red water, the smell of bleach burning my lungs. I feel like I touched something I wasn't supposed to, a private ritual of guilt and grief that plays out every night in a lonely laundromat. And I feel like somehow by unfolding that sheet, I've become a part of it. Like the stain has spread to me. and I'm terrified that one day I'll look in the mirror and see it on my own soul, a stain that will never ever wash clean. My name is Chloe. I'm 23. For about a year, I worked as a cleaner at the old Grand Majestic multiplex downtown. It was one of those jobs you take to get through college, terrible hours, sticky floors, but it paid the bills. My shift was from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. My job was to go through each of the 12 theaters after the final movies had let out and clean up the mess people left behind. Most nights, it was just me and one security guard, a guy named Al, in the entire building. It's a weird feeling being in a place like that when it's empty. A movie theater is supposed to be full of life, the smell of popcorn, the sound of laughter, the booming audio from the speakers. But at 3 a.m., it's just a cavernous, silent tomb. You get used to the quiet, though. You learn the building's rhythms, the hum of the ice machine, the groan of the HVAC system, the way the emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows down the hallways. I thought I knew every sound, every shadow. But I was wrong. I wasn't as alone as I thought, especially not in Theater 8. It started on a Wednesday. I was cleaning Theater 8 last, as I usually did. It was at the far end of a long, carpeted hallway, and it always felt colder than the other theaters. The last movie of the night had been some slasher flick, and the audience had left a battlefield of popcorn buckets and spilled soda. I had my headphones in, listening to a podcast, pushing my big rolling trash can up the aisle. As I got to the top row, I saw him. A man was sitting in the very last seat of the back row, in the corner. He was staring straight ahead at the blank silver screen. I pulled out my headphones, my heart giving a little jump. "Sir?" "The movie's over. We're closed." He didn't move. He didn't even seem to hear me. He was wearing a simple dark coat and an old-fashioned fedora-style hat that cast his face in shadow. "Excuse me, sir," I said a little louder, stepping closer. "The theater is closed." Still nothing. I felt a prickle of annoyance. Sometimes people fell asleep. I walked over to his row. "Sir, you have to leave." He remained perfectly still. I was about to reach out and tap his shoulder when a wave of cold, irrational fear washed over me. Something felt deeply wrong. I backed away slowly and went to get Al, the security guard. "Hey, Al. There's a guy in Theater 8 who won't leave," I said. Al sighed, heaving himself out of his chair. Probably drunk. He followed me back down the long hallway. But when we walked into Theater 8, the man was gone. The back row was empty. "He was right there," I insisted, pointing to the seat. "In that corner seat." Al just shrugged. "Probably slipped out while you were getting me." "Don't worry about it, kid." I tried not to, but as I cleaned the back row, I found a half-empty popcorn bucket and a soda cup right next to the seat where he'd been sitting. He had been there. The next night, I saved Theater 8 for last. Again, a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I pushed the door open and scanned the seats. It was empty. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and started cleaning. But when I got to the back row, there he was. Same seat, same dark coat and hat, staring at the blank screen. This time I didn't say anything. I just backed out slowly, my heart pounding, and ran to get Al. "He's back," I whispered, my voice shaking. Al followed me, grumbling. We walked in together. The seat was empty. "Kid, are you sure you're not just tired?" Al asked, his voice laced with pity. "It gets spooky in here at night." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "I'm not imagining it, Al." He was here. Al just shook his head and left. I stood there for a moment, feeling like I was going crazy. Then I went back to cleaning, my eyes constantly darting up to that empty seat in the corner. This became our nightly ritual. I would enter Theater 8 and he would be there. I stopped getting Al. What was the point? I would just stand in the doorway watching him for a moment. He never moved. He never made a sound. He was just a silent, unmoving silhouette. After a minute, I would back out, close the door, and clean one of the other theaters first, giving him time to disappear. When I'd return 10 minutes later, he would be gone. I started to dread cleaning Theater 8. The long walk down that hallway felt like a walk to the gallows. I knew what I would find, and the certainty of it was more terrifying than any jump scare. After about 2 weeks of this, I noticed something new. As I was sweeping under his usual seat, I found a small piece of paper. It was an old-fashioned movie ticket stub. The paper was thick and yellowed with age. It wasn't for any of the movies currently playing. The title on the stub read "The Echo in the Dark," and the date printed below it was October 23, 1988. I almost threw it away, but something made me put it in my pocket. The next night, after he had appeared and vanished, I found another one. Same movie, same date. Every single night he left a ticket stub for me. It was a message. My curiosity finally got the better of my fear. On my day off, I went to the city's main library and looked up old newspapers on the microfiche. I searched for the date on the ticket, October 23, 1988. It didn't take long to find it. A small article in the local news section dated October 24, 1988. The headline read, "Man dies during film at New Grand Majestic Cinema." My blood ran cold. I read the article, my hands trembling. A 45-year-old man named Arthur Penhaligon had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack while watching a movie. The article mentioned it was the opening weekend for the brand new Grand Majestic multiplex. The movie he was watching was a psychological thriller called The Echo in the Dark, and the theater he was in was Theater 8. He had never finished his movie. He had never left the theater. That night, I went to work with a new sense of purpose. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a profound sadness. He wasn't there to scare me. He was just stuck. I cleaned the other 11 theaters first, saving Theater 8 for the very end of my shift around 4 a.m. I pushed the door open, and there he was, my silent companion, sitting in the back row, waiting. This time, I didn't back away. I walked down the aisle, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty room. I didn't go to him. Instead, I walked up the small set of stairs to the projection booth at the back of the theater. The door was always unlocked for the cleaning crew. I stepped inside. The massive digital projectors were powered down, but the control terminal was on. I was only supposed to use it to turn on the cleaning lights, but I knew it had access to the theater's entire digital film library. My fingers trembled as I typed in the override code. I went to the search bar and typed, "The Echo in the Dark." I held my breath. After a moment, a file appeared, an old digitized version of the 1988 film. They kept it in the archives. I hit play. The screen at the front of the theater, which had been blank and silver for hours, flickered to life. The old dramatic opening music of the film began to swell, filling the silent theater. The sound was deafening in the emptiness. I stepped out of the projection booth and looked down at the back row. He was still there, but he wasn't staring at the screen anymore. He was turned around in his seat, looking up at me in the projection booth window. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. The hat and the shadows were gone. He was pale, almost translucent, with kind, sad eyes. He looked at me, and a faint, gentle smile touched his lips. It wasn't a scary smile. It was a smile of gratitude. He held my gaze for a long moment, then slowly turned back to face the screen. And as he watched the opening credits of the movie he'd never gotten to finish, his form began to shimmer. He grew fainter and fainter, like smoke in the wind, until he was completely gone. The seat was empty. I stood there and watched the entire movie with him, in that empty theater at 4 a.m. When it was over and the credits rolled, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. I cleaned the theater, and for the first time, the back row was just an empty row of seats. He never appeared again. Night after night, Theater 8 remained empty. I started to think I had really done it. I had helped him find peace. I had let him see the end of his movie. About a week later, I was cleaning Theater 8 one last time before the end of my shift. I was sweeping under his seat just out of habit, and my broom hit something small. I bent down and picked it up. It was a ticket stub, but it wasn't the old yellowed one from 1988. It was a modern one printed on glossy paper. The title on it was for the horror movie that had been playing the first night I ever saw him. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the theater's air conditioning. I turned the ticket over in my trembling fingers. On the back, written in faint spidery handwriting that looked like it had been scratched with a pin, were 2 words: "Thank you." I dropped the ticket as if it had burned me. I stumbled out of the theater and didn't look back. I quit that morning. He wasn't just an echo, a memory trapped in a loop. He was aware. He knew I was there. We had shared a movie, and he had left me a message, a thank you note from the other side. I had interacted with a ghost, and the proof was a physical object I could hold in my hand. I don't go to the movies much anymore. I can't sit in a dark theater without thinking of him. I can't see a blank screen without picturing a silent man in a dark coat, patiently waiting for the show to begin. And I know that some stories don't end just because the credits roll. Some are just waiting for the next showing. My name is Marcus. I'm 64 years old. I was supposed to retire next year. I'd been working for the Transit Authority for 30 years, the last 10 of them on the night sanitation crew. My post was the Cortlandt Street station at the end of the R line. It's one of the deep ones, an old station carved out of the bedrock of the city. After the last train pulls out at 1 a.m., the place becomes a tomb. My shift was from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., just me, a bucket of gray water, and the ghosts of a million commuters. I liked the quiet. I knew the station's sounds like my own heartbeat, the drip of water from a leaky pipe, the hum of the third rail, the scuttling of rats in the tunnels. They were the sounds of a city sleeping. But one night I heard a new sound, a sound that didn't belong, and it cost me my job, my peace, and the last good year of my life. It started on a Monday, or maybe a Tuesday. The days blend together when you work those hours. It was about halfway through my shift. I was mopping the platform, the wet slap of the mop echoing in the cavernous silence. The station clock read 3:32 a.m. That's when I felt it first, a vibration, a low hum that started in the soles of my worn-out work boots and traveled up my legs. I stopped mopping. The hum grew louder, and then I heard it, a faint rumbling coming from deep within the northbound tunnel. That was impossible. The last train had run hours ago. The tracks were dead until 5:30 a.m. I walked to the edge of the platform, peering into the pitch-black maw of the tunnel. The rumbling grew into a roar, and a sudden wind, cold and smelling of ozone and damp earth, blasted out of the tunnel, whipping my uniform around me. Then I saw them. 2 faint lights like pinpricks growing larger and brighter. A train was coming. My first thought was that it was an unscheduled maintenance train, but those were always announced. My radio was silent. The train burst out of the tunnel, a deafening roar of metal on metal. It wasn't one of the new, sleek silver trains. It was an old one, a relic from the 70s, covered in a thick layer of faded, overlapping graffiti. The windows were dark, grimy, and the cars were completely empty. It thundered through the station without slowing down, a phantom blur of rust and spray paint. It didn't stop. It just passed through, its roar echoing off the tiled walls, and then it plunged into the tunnel on the other side, leaving only a profound, ringing silence in its wake. It happened so fast I thought I must have imagined it. A micro-sleep, maybe. A waking dream brought on by years of night shifts. I shook my head, my heart pounding, and went back to my mop. The next night I was on edge. I kept glancing at the clock, then at the dark, empty tunnel. I told myself I was being stupid, but as the clock ticked past 3:32, I felt it again. The vibration in my feet, the low hum, the cold wind rushing out of the darkness. This time I was ready. I stood right on the yellow warning line, my eyes fixed on the tunnel. The train exploded into the station just as it had before. The same old graffiti-covered cars, but this time I looked closer. I forced my eyes to focus on the dirty windows as they blurred past. And in one of the windows of the third car, I saw a figure. It was just a silhouette, a dark shape standing and holding on to one of the poles. Its face was a featureless blur in the darkness. The train was gone in a second, but the image was burned into my mind. A single solitary passenger on a train that didn't exist. The next morning, I talked to my supervisor, a young guy named Dave who spent most of his time behind a desk. "Hey Dave," I said, trying to sound casual. "You guys running any unscheduled trains through Cortlandt Street at night?" He looked at me over his glasses. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" "The line's dead after 1 a.m. You know that." "I know, but I swear I saw one. An old R46 model came through around 3:30. Dave pulled up the system logs on his computer. The tracks are lined with pressure sensors and signal relays that log every train that passes. "Look," he said, turning the screen to me. "Here's the last train at 1:04 a.m. And here's the first one at 5:32 a.m. Nothing in between, not for the last year." He gave me a patronizing smile. "You're probably just hearing phantom vibrations from the freight lines up top. The old tunnels play tricks on your ears." I knew what I saw, and I knew what I heard. It wasn't a phantom vibration. I became obsessed. Every night I waited for the 3:33. That's what I started calling it. It was always on time. The hum, the wind, the roar, and the fleeting glimpse of the lonely passenger in the third car. Who was he? Where was he going? I needed to see his face. A week later, I had a plan. I brought a high-powered flashlight from home. As 3:32 approached, I stood at the very edge of the platform, my heart hammering against my ribs. The rails began to hum. The cold wind blasted my face. The train appeared, a roaring monster emerging from the abyss. I held my ground. As the third car approached, I raised the flashlight and hit the switch, aiming the powerful beam directly at the window where the figure always stood. For a split second, the beam cut through the grime and the darkness, and I saw him. And the sight made my soul freeze. It was a young man, maybe in his early 20s. His face was pale, almost translucent. His eyes were wide with a look of pure, undiluted terror. His mouth was open in a silent scream. He wasn't just a passenger, he was a victim. He was trapped in a moment of absolute horror. As the car shot past me, he raised a hand and pressed it against the inside of the window. For a fraction of a second, I saw a ghostly, ephemeral handprint left on the glass before it and the train were swallowed by the tunnel. I stumbled back from the edge, dropping the flashlight. It clattered on the concrete, its beam spinning wildly. I couldn't breathe. I had seen the face of the ghost on the train. I didn't finish my shift that night. I just packed my things and left. The next day, I went to the public library, my hands still shaking. I started looking through old newspaper archives from the 1970s when those old graffiti-covered trains were still in service. I didn't even know what I was looking for. A train crash? A derailment? I found it in a small article from a 1978 edition of the New York Post. The headline was simple: "Subway shove turns fatal." The story was brief. A young NYU student named Michael Rojas had been waiting for the last train of the night at the Cortlandt Street station. According to a witness, he got into a brief argument with an unidentified man. As the train was pulling into the station, the man shoved him. Michael fell onto the tracks and was killed instantly. The assailant escaped in the ensuing chaos and was never caught. I read the article 3 times, but my eyes kept getting stuck on the last paragraph. The police report had noted the official time of death based on the train's schedule and the witness statement. It was approximately 3:33 a.m. I dropped the microfiche reader and leaned back in my chair, the world spinning around me. I wasn't seeing a ghost train, I was seeing an echo. A psychic scar left on time itself. A murder replaying itself every single night for all eternity. The train wasn't the ghost, the station was. I couldn't go back. I couldn't bear to witness that young man's final, terrifying moment again and again. I called Dave and told him I was retiring, effective immediately. He was surprised, but I think he was also relieved. He probably thought the old man had finally lost his marbles. I'm retired now. I live in a small apartment in Queens. It's quiet, but it's not a peaceful quiet. Every night, when the city sleeps, I find myself awake. And every night at 3:32 a.m., I feel it. A faint vibration in the floorboards. A low hum that no one else can hear. I know it's just in my head. But I also know that deep under the city, in a dark and empty station, a cold wind is beginning to blow. A train is approaching, and a young man with terrified eyes is about to live through the last horrible second of his life all over again. He's still riding the 3:33, and I'm the only one who knows he's on board.